Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore full time so that you don't have to. The ongoing quest to complete a monster ecology video for every single monster listed in the core monster manual for 5th edition D&D continues with the pyromaniac elemental fire goblins known as the Magmin, also occasionally written as Magman or Magmen. They are small, about 4 feet tall and 1 foot wide, with a large head in proportion to the rest of their body and longer arms. Almost a primate build, but not quite. It's supposed to be a childlike appearance. They have a bandy-legged gait and tend to scamper and skip around 30 feet per round, rather than just walking or jogging anywhere. They will cartwheel and swing around on hanging objects, climb and jump from things, and generally move about in fits and bursts, stopping to perch and crouch on a ledge, shelf or raised objects when they stop to listen or converse with another being. The Magman first appeared in the 1st edition module called the Dungeons of the Slave Lords, or In the Dungeons of the Slave Lords, published in 1981, and 2 years later they were included in the Monster Manual 2. They popped back up in the pages of the Planescape campaign setting, the boxed set, almost 10 years later, and were included in the core and revised Monster Manual for 3.5 edition, as well as, of course, a player character version for the excellent sourcebook Savage Species. In 5th edition, we find them at home on page 212 of the core Monster Manual, with a nice depiction of one looking suitably manic. Their stats are pretty straightforward. They have a natural armor class of 14, being small, agile, and made of a cracked skin of magma with a liquid rock core. They are totally immune to fire and heat, have only 2d6 plus 2, or between 4 and 14 hit points with an average of 9. Plus they are resistant to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. They have an intelligence of 8, wisdom of 11, charisma of 10, constitution of 12, dexterity of 15, and strength of 7. Magmin can see 60 feet in darkness, but can also just release flame from themselves, shining light from the blaze out brightly to 10 feet and dimly to a further 10 feet out to 20 feet. They are so hot that they only need to touch things as their form of attack. They are plus 4 to hit anything and do 2d6 fire damage on contact. If the target is a creature or a flammable object, it ignites. So, a creature ignites. Until a creature takes an action to douse the fire, the target takes 1d6 fire damage at the end of each of its turns. So, that's burning fiercely. The internal heat of the Magmin is under their control, unless they are killed, at which point it is all suddenly released in a death burst explosion. When the Magmin dies, it explodes in a burst of fire and magma. Each creature within 10 feet of it must make a DC 11 dexterity saving throw, taking 2d6 fire damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. And of course, flammable objects that aren't being worn or carried in that 10-foot area are also ignited from flying bits of magma. The Magmin lives primarily on the elemental plane, but can easily travel to the material plane by manifesting itself in fireplaces, stoves, forges, and other such places of intense heat. It likes to frighten housewives, blacksmiths, and other people working at these places by drooling a drop of lava or setting a fire so that to what they're working on, but really intends to cause more harm than that, and they're just doing it to see what happens. Magmin are elementals. This is a very metaphorical attempt to describe their psychological makeup. Really, they are very alien beings with a perspective on the multiverse that is way, way different to you or I. So here goes, for better or for worse. Magmin are almost the incarnation of a primordial creator's wish to just play in or with the things they create. That's why they have this impish, childlike, irrepressible and mischievous aspect to them. However, they are not completely chaotic creatures. The Magmin has a neutral alignment, and even though they delight in setting things on fire, they are endlessly fascinated with how things on the prime material plane are like combustible. But the fire needs this locked up chemistry in order to exist, which is weird for them. They're not setting things on fire and burning creatures to death out of a malicious intent. They don't understand why fire would hurt, or what harm there is in making fire, or why beings made of this weird combination of disgusting water and good dependable carbon are so attached to things, or why they get so angry when the Magmin turns other things into piles of ash, which is mostly carbon anyway, or why they don't just eat carbon, or why they have to breathe, or how something has to die when it gets eaten by another thing. We are so strange to the Magmin. We always try to control, oppress, and dominate them. when all they want to do is explore, experience, play, and feel the excitement, or rather try to feel some excitement on the prime material plane, despite it being cool, cold, drab, and entropic to them, as the Shadowfell is to us, and disgustingly full of that most hated substance, water. They are little adrenaline junkies. They have a boundless distaste for being stuck in an environment without sufficient explosions and towering infernos. So they're very difficult to control, and they resent every moment they are being controlled. They're not used to it, and they don't understand it or like it. In the elemental plane of fire and earth, in the border zones, Magmin can vort and play. Great swarms of them dance and race about in the ever-changing landscape. Sure, they get chased down and consumed occasionally by larger elementals all the time, but this is not a transition. This is just a transition for an elemental spirit. It's not death. It is emerging with a greater life force. Elementals don't need to eat each other. Their ecosystems are not built around subsistence on each other, but their growth from smaller to larger and more complex forms of elemental life is based on absorbing each other and becoming stronger, more dominant. In a pure elemental environment, the spirits of the earth are moving through a completely solid medium as energy beings. The material bodies they inhabit in environments of mixed elements are just vehicles for them. Magmins do not feel physical pain, they do not get hungry, and of course, they have no concept of what thirst feels like. They do not feel cold. They do feel cold, and they do understand mortality. They know that prime material creatures can figure out ways to actually destroy them, so they do fear us. Despite not usually intending true harm, the Magmin is still a powerful fighter. Its touch is very dangerous to those who were not resistant to fire, and it can cause small explosions from itself. It can bite, scratch, and spit, all of which can set fire to anything flammable by touch. They can set fire to clothing, make armor searing hot, and melt weapons. They will fight to protect themselves from being controlled or harmed, and will quickly run away if they're facing significant damage, probably setting a few raging infernos to vent their anxiety. They set things on fire because flammable objects are just all over the place on the prime material worlds, unlike back home where they live. They inhabit the border areas of the elemental plane of fire and the elemental plane of earth. This is the big rocky areas where there is a more significant amount of solid matter to prance and scamper about on. There we find the fabled interdimensional marketplace, home of the Efreet, the city of brass. But there are vast tracts of volcanic terrain nearby. Well, relatively nearby. The elemental plane is vast. The border zone of magma has more square miles than your average inhabitable planet. And that zone itself has border regions with varying degrees of predominantly rock or fire mixtures. Some areas are far more dangerous than others, such as the pyroclastic zones, where the rock is constantly exploding and shattering into flying fragments, then sinking and being swallowed up by the magma, and then blasted out in furiously bubbling and bursting lava pools, open craters and calderas and so on. The Magmin can easily withstand even areas as dangerous as this, because even a high-speed volley of razor-sharp obsidian fragments pelting from 5 different angles does them little harm. They may get slammed and thrown this way and that, have their ground explode and fling them high into the air, plunging down in a belching mire of melted stone, but they will soon be racing across the landscape again, pausing to splash their feet in puddles of melted metal. For them, this sort of environment is nothing short of a free amusement park where all the rides have absolutely no safety considerations at all. Not too far from the Magmin's playground, you can find some of the elemental dragons. Some of them are called magma dragons, others call them volcanic dragons. They don't really bother the Magmins that much unless the explosions and mayhem get so excessive that it draws the ire of the dragon to come and chase them, snatching them up and flying them off to drop deep into lakes of lava. Magmin don't usually get hurt by this, but it takes them a long time to walk all the way back to rejoin the other Magmin, which is boring. Plus, lots of really big elementals move through the lakes of magma and are quite likely to just swallow up a Magmin without even getting noticed. See, elementals move around in the elemental planes unseen most of the time. Why would an fire elemental move across the surface where it has to build a body for itself when it can just move through the convections and heat layers of the rock around it, and which is all liquid anyway? As crazy as it sounds, the zones of pyroclastic destruction are actually the safest places for the Magmin to be. You would think that Magmin wouldn't mind hanging out with demons, considering their love of chaos and destruction, but demons are evil, Magmin are not, and the demons play very nasty games. Plus they're angry all the time, and they tend to find ways to kill the Magmin, which is totally unacceptable by the Magmins. So if you see a load of Magmin running away from something, it's probably a big fire or earth elemental coming through, or they are running away from some demons, so beware. They also stay out of the salamander territory, as the big serpent folk consider them pests and are also really mean to them. Azir, Dower and the Flamehead dwarves work too hard making things that they don't want to melt, but they just put up runes that deter the Magmin from staying in their territory for very long, and the runes are quite uncomfortable for the Magmin, like they're humming something in primordial language that the Magmin find unpleasant to hear. Magmin speak Ignan, of course, a stuttering language of snaps, crackles, hisses and pops. Their propensity for fire and havoc makes them ideal for spreading chaos and destruction. A mob of Magmin summoned inside a castle can reduce it to a burning shell within minutes. War mages of Cormia have been known to summon Magmin to race through groups of enemy soldiers, setting their equipment ablaze and turning their metal armour into searing hot plates. While the 5th edition monster manual may imply that they only have a physical form because the summoners bind them into one, they do also take physical form back in the elemental planes as well, just they don't have to wear a physical body all the time. They can exist within magma, merged with the liquid rock quite comfortably. They would probably be content to lounge around in magma spa pools sipping on liquid copper cocktails, were it not for that more chaotic side of their neutral alignment. They can't sit still for very long. Magmin pair up really well with iron golems. They may be content to sit in little turret seats mounted on the shoulders of the golem, the Master Blaster situation, using their heat to regenerate the golem if it is damaged. They can also serve as reasonably manageable sources of elemental heat for high-level arcanists, who summon them and contain them in their laboratories. Even trapping them is something a little bit like an elemental-powered steam engine. The Magmin detest being held against their will though, and given half a chance, they will turn on any mage who has bound them to the prime material plane. They may divulge valuable secrets if you find one that's been trapped and are offering to let it free. There's a chance of telling these secrets that will get them free from the wizard's lair. The Magmin will definitely divulge all sorts of secrets of the wizard that has bound them. Got any suggestions for how you'd use a Magmin to spice up an encounter? What creatures pair really well with them in a fight? I'd love to hear your suggestions. Let us know in the comment section down below. Also like, subscribe, check out my Patreon for more exclusive content and all the full scripts of these videos. Buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride. Check out Patron Blades for a mighty smooth shave, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.